All right, today we are diving into a book that is less of a book and more of a philosophical stick of dynamite. I'm talking about Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. This thing was designed to completely blow up the foundations of Western thought. So, let's light the fuse. Just let that sink in for a second. For literally thousands of years, the goal of all philosophy was pretty simple: go find the truth. But Nietzsche, he kicks off his whole investigation with this wild, almost offensive question. It really sets the stage for a kind of detective story, where the crime we're investigating isn't a murder, but a hidden assumption that pretty much all of us have been living with. So who would even have the guts to ask something like that? Well, that would be our philosophical detective, Friedrich Nietzsche. He was the one thinker willing to really investigate the most basic assumption of all, this idea that truth is automatically a good thing to have. You see, for millennia, philosophers talked about the will to truth with this kind of holy reverence. It was the noble quest, right? The engine of all great thought. I mean, Plato, Aristotle, Kant, they all started from the same place, that we should want the truth. Nietzsche is the first one to just stop, look around, and ask, why? Why should we? And this is the central mystery we're unpacking here. What if this whole relentless hunt for one single, objective, universal truth isn't this noble quest we think it is? What if, and this is Nietzsche's whole point, what if it's actually a dangerous prejudice, a kind of illusion we've been trapped in for centuries? Okay, so let's get into it. If these great thinkers, these icons of philosophy, aren't pure, unbiased seekers of truth, then what are they really doing? This is where Nietzsche puts on his detective hat and gives us a pretty provocative answer. And here it is, Nietzsche's first major clue. He says that philosophers are basically putting on a performance. They want you to believe that their grand, complicated systems are the product of pure, cold, unemotional logic. But for Nietzsche, it's just a mask. It's a very sophisticated act. Yeah, because underneath that mask of pure reason, he finds something much more, well, human. He says their philosophies aren't actually born from logic. They're born from a desire of the heart, an instinct, a gut feeling, a deep-seated prejudice that they then use logic to justify after the fact. So reason just becomes the high-priced lawyer for a verdict that their gut already delivered. So here's the crucial point, the big reveal. Nietzsche concludes that a philosophical system isn't really a map of objective reality at all. It's more like a psychological profile of the person who wrote it. It tells you everything about who that philosopher is, what they're afraid of, what they hope for, and what their deepest drives are. So he's exposed the motive of the philosopher, but he's not done, not even close. Now he goes even deeper, arguing that the entire system of Western thought, going all the way back to Plato, is built on one single, incredibly shaky assumption. And this is where Nietzsche really flips the whole table over. He points to what he calls the fundamental faith of the metaphysicians, this absolute, unquestioning belief in opposite values. That good is the pure opposite of evil, true is the pure opposite of false, and that they have nothing to do with each other. And then he drops the next bombshell. What if these neat and tidy opposites are a total fiction? What if good is actually secretly tied to, and maybe even grows directly out of, the very things we call evil? What if our most cherished values are just one very limited, very subjective point of view? He has this brilliant metaphor for it. Our big, grand view of good and truth might just be what he calls a frog perspective. Just us looking up from our own tiny little pond, thinking we're seeing the whole universe. Okay, so if the main drive isn't for truth, then what's the real engine behind philosophy? And maybe behind all of life itself? This question leads us straight to Nietzsche's most famous and probably most misunderstood idea. Now, it is absolutely crucial that we get this right. When we hear will to power, our minds jump to, political tyrants or something. But for Nietzsche, that's not it at all. It's way more fundamental. It's the basic, innate drive of life itself, to expand, to express its own force, to overcome challenges, and to grow. And this is such a key distinction. For centuries, we believed that the number one instinct is just self-preservation. Just survive. Nietzsche says, nope, that's a side effect. The main event, the primary drive, is to discharge your strength, to grow, to become more than what you currently are. And this is what brings our whole detective story full circle. Even that will to truth that philosophers love to talk about, that's just an expression of the will to power. It's the will of a certain kind of person who wants their specific way of seeing the world to organize and master all the other ways of seeing it. So, okay, Nietzsche has basically torn down the entire house of old philosophy. He's unmasked all the prejudices. But he doesn't just leave us sitting in the rubble. He actually sketches out a vision for a new kind of thinker, a philosopher for a brand new age. And these new thinkers, they're a completely different breed. They aren't the dogmatists of the past searching for some pre-existing truth hidden under a rock. No, Nietzsche calls them attempters, commanders, and most famously, free spirits. These free spirits, they get the game. They understand that all these moral codes, all these truths, are human creations. They're just expressions of the will to power. So instead of blindly following the values of the past, they have the strength, the sheer guts to stand alone, look at the world from new angles, and actually create new values. And that brings us to the ultimate conclusion of Nietzsche's great unmasking. Once you clear away the rubble of all the old beliefs, you see philosophy for what it truly is. It's not a passive act of discovery. It's an active, powerful, artistic act of creation. The goal isn't just to describe the world, but to shape it. But, and this is a very big but, Nietzsche leaves these new, daring thinkers with a pretty chilling warning. Because venturing out into this new territory, trying to live beyond the old, comfortable certainties of good and evil, that is a very dangerous game. And this is the final, haunting thought he leaves us with. Staring into the void of a world that has no objective truth or morality isn't a spectator sport. The abyss stares back. It changes you. And that perhaps is the ultimate risk and the ultimate challenge of Nietzsche's entire project.